Welcome again to Exchange. It's delightful to see many people here. It's lovely to see lots of familiar faces who come back year and year again. So very good morning to you, and indeed to all of you who have come in here for the first time. Some of you perhaps from universities who have only just joined the conversation. So welcome to you all. I hope this is going to be a very interesting day for you all. I remember, because it was quite traumatic at the time, but being here a year ago, the day after the election, which was called just a few weeks before the event, driving a coach and horses through a whole bunch of my plans. But it all went well on the day, I think. But I remember standing here and casting an optimistic look forward about what the potential for a new government would bring to the sector. So that hasn't happened. And I think it's been a pretty tough 12 months for most of us here. And I suppose in that spirit, without wanting to start on a bum note, but in that spirit, we're here today to do more with less. To get more done, to be more effective, to learn new ways of doing things, and to learn from each other. So we are going to have a number of panel chats and some speakers here today. In just a minute, I'll turn over to Justin Shaw, who's going to talk about what you can do as universities with the resources you already have, and what more you can do with those. Later on in the morning, we will talk about what more you can do with another great resource the universities has, which is, of course, the expertise of your researchers, and how you can get that expertise into the right hands of policymakers and people that can make use of it. And later still, we'll also talk about engagement, and sort of following on from a chat we had last year about how to really get academics to engage with the business of communications and taking those additional steps outside of their research and their teaching to link up all the dots to make things like good communication, good research communication, and good research impact happen. So we've got lots to talk about today, and I hope that I want you to urge you to really engage with it in the spirit of getting involved. We're here to listen, but we're also here to share. What do you know? What works for you? What tips, techniques, suggestions can you share? Because I want everyone to go home at the end of Exchange, as each year, with a pocket full of ideas that you can take home and try for yourselves. So on that note, I will pass over to our lead speaker, Justin Shaw, who's a senior higher education consultant, chief higher education consultant at Research Communications Management. We're delighted to have him here. Justin.
Thanks, Michael. So just a couple of corrections before I start. First of all, when I was speaking to Michael, I think he came up with the title Research as a Tool for Student Recruitment. I don't like the word tool, so I'll be talking about the contribution that research makes towards student recruitment and student engagement. I will get onto that, I promise, but I've got a few other things to start off with. The second thing, I think, is also to correct a misapprehension that in the cast list I'm billed as the renowned consultant. I'm not renowned. So Michael, hyperbole, these days you've got to play it straight. So let me start, a bit about me to start with, but me in context really. So many years ago I used to work at the University of Hertfordshire. I was running the communications team. In fact, I was the communications team in its entirety, doing everything. I was very keen to develop research content for the university and look at what the university was doing on the research side. But this was my proudest achievement. It was on the front page of the Times, and 30 years ago when England were really struggling at cricket, and we were getting walloped, literally, then I asked the engineering labs to do a project to research spin bowling and how our cricket team could perhaps learn from them in terms of handling the spin bowling and how they could adapt their own bowling techniques. So we had this great project that fed into it, and the top line, scientists at the University of Hertfordshire have set up a research project to crack the code of an enemy secret weapon that has inflicted great damage on England. no greater testimony to research than that. So I was very proud of that achievement. So since then, I've been working with different universities globally, looking at different aspects of research communications. And for the last 18 months, I've been undertaking a sector-wide project, which is examining the state of research communications. So I've been interviewing all sorts of universities, different parts of the world, collecting evidence about teams, resources, capacity, roles, budgets, the focus and priorities of the roles, the channels that are being used, campaigns, measurement, and so on. So it's taken me 18 months so far, and by November I've promised myself that I would be publishing that report, and that's driven by a lot of interest in research communications in recent years. When I started out, research communications was something you didn't do a lot of. Research was over there, teaching was over there, business engagement and so on. They were all operating in separate silos, and you didn't really see the joins and the benefits from those. So lots of, if you're interested in that report, let me know, and I'll make sure you get a copy when that is published. Or if you have something interesting to say that you think is a bit different about your university and its work contributing to that, also let me know. One of the things people have been asking me as part of this is, so what's a typical team structure and size for research communications? And this is the largest example I've come across, which is at the University of Arizona. 15 team members devoted solely to research communications, based in the research office, but a large team of different specialists within that. I've also had some conversations with fantastic people in this, including this guy, who's a professor of research communications at Australia. And he was one of the pioneers of something called the Panton Principles. Anybody heard of that? Any scientists in the audience heard of the Panton Principles? 10 years ago, they were created in a pub in the Panton Arms pub in Cambridge, and they were championing open science and protecting how universities could publish their science to open audiences. Anyway, interesting people I'm speaking to as part of this project as well. I'm also involved in an organisation called IRMA. So in America, this is mostly an American-based organisation. This is a network of people who work in research communications, both in central universities, but also in colleges and research institutes. And it's starting to grow more internationally. And they have an annual conference, and they have a great chat site where if you've got a question about who's doing interesting stuff on this or how do I do this, you can instantly post seek help from that. Membership is $50, £36 equivalent, so really cost effective and a good bunch of people. I've also been looking at demographics and studying the sort of different habits and interests, the channels, the motivations and so on, particularly around Gen Z. So I have 2 Gen Zs in my house, and I've been studying them as sort of a case study. They're a bit of a mystery to me, really, but well, I can recognise, I now understand them better because I've been looking at these sort of demographic trends. And the other thing I've been doing is developing up a model that links research into the ultimate value of reputation for the university. So the contribution that research makes in terms of knowledge and awareness of an institution, how it builds trust in an institution, and how that eventually leads to choice and income. And I think this is quite a key model for our times because it's protecting the interests of what we do in research to promote academic research, that it isn't a sideline, it is a nice to have, it's an essential driver of choice and therefore income. Come back to that in a moment. So thinking about the student audiences, which I will come on into more detail, but I think as we're in an exchange, I thought it'd be useful to exchange with you some ideas I've come across and drawn from my different experiences of other universities globally. And these are for you to look at, to think, to consider, to reflect on. You might like to pinch a few ideas, copy them, because they may work. You could apply them to your situation, or you might think they're not relevant. But in some way, I hope they stimulate some thinking for you. So different new things that universities have been doing in recent years to look at how research is is getting out there and making people feel more engaged externally. So there was a trend a couple of years ago to start doing interactive voting, particularly through social media. A couple of campaigns in particular. So the OU had its People Choice Awards, and Helene is here and she can tell you more about that. She's in the stripy jumper, third row, sitting on the end there. And this campaign at the OU was basically designed to say, well, here are 4 key challenges, research challenges that we're tackling. We'd like you to vote on which you think is the most important from all that. And they had a voting system, and they had Lily Cole, the model then, who was championing and being the front face of that campaign. So anything you wanted to add on that at this stage?
Yeah, it worked really well because she fronted it very well, because she has a real passion for sustainability. And I think it was one of the first times that we put it out to the public, to decide, on which of these projects was worth funding, would make the most difference, really.
So I think the winning one was human trafficking, number 4 on that list, if I'm right. That was the most popular one. So it was quite novel because it was one of the first examples of using a public interaction, a public voting system to get interest, to stimulate interest and showcase research. And then UCL at the same time. Anybody from UCL? Yeah? No? UCL had a similar approach. They had a Made at UCL campaign. They drew lots of examples of their research work. They came up with a list of 100 of their main discoveries over their entire existence, designed to underline their pedigree since 1826 and the difference that they've made. And again, they got people to vote on what were the best discoveries that UCL has made using social media. They had 20,000 votes through that system, and there were a series of awards and things. So that started to happen. What was that, 3-4 years ago? Maybe that was maybe even longer. Yeah. And then other approaches. So in Canada, the University of Guelph had launched a photographic competition to identify, illustrate the work of its researchers in different contexts. So we invite their researchers every year to submit photographs that best sum up their research projects or their research expertise. And this is a photograph of Lorraine, who won the award 2022, I think, was this project on crop science. Used to be called Through the Lens, but they boringly rebranded it as Research in Focus to sort of give it more gravitas within the university. But there's another example of getting people involved to vote on something and then having a public exhibition of those photographs as a way to stimulate interest in their work. This is great. Came across this a couple of months ago at a conference in America. So this is a tattoo contest. So University of Georgia, based in Athens in Georgia, they put out an open call to their staff to say, we want to identify academics who've got research-based tattoos, i.e. a summary of their pictorial summary of their research interest as symbolised through tattoos. And of course, academics are rushing out suddenly to tattoo studios to get. So the prize is a $50 voucher for a tattoo studio. So they sort of wasted their money before the result. But again, so they're trying to do something new that teases interest and stimulates things. And actually the judging takes place on this next week. Memorial University, who have done a bit of work with, is based in Newfoundland and in Canada. And they were playing around with different ways to promote their academics and their researchers. And one of the things that they came up with was a hero-style comic approach. So they created this League of Extraordinary Researchers, a comic book with lots of strip cartoons around the work of their different academics. And they use that in student recruitment, they use that with student audiences, and more widely with the public as well. And I remember reading this, and they were telling me that there's the most boring academic they've ever come across in the university. And his work was something to do with stocks and shares in the business school. They couldn't understand what that work was about. But through using a strip cartoon to boil it down and summarise it, they made him into this hero figure, him wandering around the streets with a suitcase full of financial literature and documents and stuff. So, so again, a novel approach that they're thinking about doing something different there. Over in Australia, so one of the things we've seen again in recent years is a growth in the use of dedicated online parts of university websites to promote content about research as if they were their own brands as well. And the Americans are very good at this, at doing this. But in the University of Newcastle in Australia, they created something called Hippocampus. Now, hippocampus is a play on words because there are two things in that. One is hippocampus is part of the brain which is about creativity and thinking, but it's also their university logo, and the hippocampus is a mythical sea creature, rather like a sea horse. So they built on that, and they built a whole web presence on their website that is sort of an independent thought leadership site around new research that's coming out. And for me, what's quite interesting is that they have this section called Here, which points to different parts of the world, and you can hover and scroll down on your mouse, and it will come up with particular stories that are happening in different parts of the world. So again, it tells you that they're internationally active and making a difference to parts of the world there. How many of you have podcasts for your university generally? How many have podcasts just for research? A few. So, yeah, this sort of going backwards, there was a phase of them coming in, but there are a few good ones out there. There has just been published last month the 30 best UK research podcasts, and there were 4 universities in that top 10, and the highest was GCU, Glasgow Caledonian University's Common Good podcast. So, anybody from GCU? So GCU's mission is about for the common weal, the common good. And this podcast they created to talk about all sorts of things, plus research. But my God, is it boring. So I listened last week to some of them, and they had the Vice-Chancellor talking about my 18-year stint as Vice-Chancellor of this university and what I've achieved and isn't that great and worthy. And then they had an academic launching an MSc and a degree, and the minutiae of the degree elements and modules and so on. But I don't know how it's in the top 10. It's number 5. And there are far better ones I've come across, including NTU. Is Helen here from NTU? Helen. So NTU, who did some great work with branding their research around the RE theme, has Reframe. That's still going, isn't it?
Yeah, Reframe, yeah, that's on newish.
So how often do you produce that?
1 month at the moment, 2 if we've got something that's a bit more newsworthy.
It's more interesting. I like to listen to that because it's more interesting in terms of the focus of the work. So it's talking mostly about experts and their areas that in subject matter that externally people are interested in as well. Some other good ones, Tulane University at the top there, which is from New Orleans, has On Good Authority, really worth looking to. Really humorous, but with a serious undercurrent. So able to talk about research work that they're doing in a good, accessible way. University of Chicago has Big Brains, their version. Florida has Explore as their brand. By the way, Explore at the University of Florida is their research communications brand. So they've built a brand just for their team called Explore. And they invest millions in promoting academic research. And they're able to do that because the university invented Gatorade. People know Gatorade, sort of like Lucozade for us, energy drink. And now to the university, they get so many royalties back from that they feed that money back into research, including research comms as well. So they're able to do massive things that we dream and we aspire to as well. I can't read this now. PhDivas is another good one, talking about PhD research as well. So something gone wrong with the slide, but never mind. But the general theme is around imagery. So anybody from Reading? Yeah, you'll know this by heart. For me, it's been terrific. So Ed Hawkins, Professor of Climate Science, 2015, I think he came up with the climate circle was the original iteration, and then it became the climate stripes. And you probably all know this image there, which is now used commonly. And it's basically from 1850 to now, how the planet has heated up year by year. So every stripe is a year, or a decade. Is it a decade? Yeah, decade. A decade. So you'll see in the last 50 or so years how the red colour is so much prevalent, and it's getting darker red even more. So it's a stark image telling us of a problem that's happening, and the university's built a sort of brand, a broader brand around that, around its climate change expertise as one of its standout features and focuses. It's now used by the COP conferences, have it as a backdrop. It's used by media on their back screens, on the Economist cover. You can buy leggings, cufflinks, ties, whatever you want in this brand. But cleverly, what the university did was to set up a Show Your Stripes website and campaign. And in there, it said, we know you're going to use this for your own purposes, this image, but if you are, please, could you make a donation to the university, and that will fund us to be able to do more PhD research into climate change. So they've linked that back into university. So for me, it's a really striking example of using imagery to make a difference there. And I'll come back to Reading because there's a more recent trend there that is relevant to the student market that they built on from that as well. University of Derby, anybody from Derby? I don't think there's anybody from Derby here. They've sort of emulated that and used the turtle as their imagery. So the University of Derby is probably the furthest most university from the coast. It's bang in the centre almost of northern UK. And but they have expertise in coastal research and coral research in particular. And they have an academic called Michael Sweet, and he researches coral degradation and how people can take coral that is healthy and transplant that into coral reefs that are dying. And they've used this turtle as a symbol of their solving these problems. So the turtle being that the turtle thrives in those areas and sea areas and ocean areas where coral is successful. So they've built lots of interest around that. And if you go on the homepage of their website now, this features heavily in their general promotional activity as their sort of champion icon and a symbol of bringing about positive change to the world overall. You see any turtles in running around?
It's the only turtle in Derby though.
So moving on to what I'm really here to talk about, which is future students. So all those examples are relevant to wider audiences, public audiences, and of course to prospective students as well. But there are things that are going on more specifically now to steer student interest and choices based on using research as a driver for that. So promise you this is the only slide with any bullets on. So what I've distilled from my conversations and my work so far is that basically there are four key areas where universities are using research to make a difference in their academic focus for targeting at future students. So, for example, they're trying to create an emotional appeal around the positioning of the university, that we stand for something, we represent something of value, and we're solving really important problems, and we're demonstrating our values. And I think it was Simon Dunford at UEA who told me a few years ago that he was starting to notice that students were starting to show interest in academic research, potential students. So they built their campaign, which was Without Borders. Is that right? Yeah. Around that. So that was the first, and then they built around that. So more broader campaigns to show that universities are passionate about solving world problems and making a difference, and that we have a generation that is more interested in that and wants to solve that because they're more concerned about world problems. And then there's also an element about tying in research to the particular mission or brand of university. I'll use examples in a moment to demonstrate that. There's also promoting research, the benefits of research as a personal benefit to you as a student. So, for example, you'll be taught by academics who are researchers who bring their thinking into the classroom, or you'll develop your own research skills as a student while you're here. Also using research as a method to interest students by creating opportunities for students to participate in research, whether they're in schools or youth clubs or whatever, or attending open days. And then also cleverly targeting some of those influences on student choices, particularly the teaching profession. So I'll just give some colour behind that. So I mentioned earlier about me trying to understand my kids who are 20 and 22, classic Gen Zers. I'd recommend this book, very easy to read, by an American called Jonathan Haidt. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it really neatly sums up. Any Gen Zs here? So that's 1995 to, or isn't it? Yeah. You know who you are. You look very anxious. So there's what he does is he boils down this generational need, is that we have a generation that's grown up in really times when the world has been stressed and tested and is constantly being challenged all the time, and new things going on by geopolitics and other things, and it's tough times, and that won't go away. So what we have to do is to help young people to, as he said, move into discover mode, which is find solutions, find ways to get around those problems, not just retrench away from them and shy away from them. So, and this is a key quote relevant to universities in that book. So just going back to the theme about universities representing causes and wanting to stand out for their passion, something that they really represent. So anybody is Judy from Loughborough here? No, I was hoping Judy Wing from Loughborough was here. She was on the list. Has anybody seen this campaign recently? No, very live, active at the moment. The World Can't Wait campaign. So it's quite an emotional video that they've produced, which is basically saying that actually the things are getting tougher and tougher, and we have warfare going on, we have famine, we have poverty, we have constant financial challenges, and things are just constantly a concern. And the world can't wait to solve that, so we need your help as a potential student to help join us and almost take up the cause and champion the battle around that. So they've built this whole campaign around the world can't wait. So take a look at that. You can see that on the Loughborough University website. And then they got the Vice-Chancellor to write this open letter about the mess that higher education is in and why we should all be taking part in this, getting behind this campaign. But they did a very poor job with that, because it starts off quite well as a letter, and then it starts to reference the wonderful things that Loughborough University is doing, a long list of partnerships, new courses we're launching and so on, and it just devalues the whole sort of causal positioning of that. So have a look at that, see what you think. A better example is Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. So they've been running this campaign called the Change It campaign. And what their fundamental idea was that, again, we have newborn children, young people growing up at a time now when there's so much going on that they are really endangered, and we have to pull together and work with them to solve the problems of their future. So they showcased their research at open days. They had a documentary made, which they now show at open days. They target students with this message about the future and how we're helping to tackle this issue. So they've run this campaign for 5 years, and in year one, they had an 85% increase in positive sentiment, more favourable attitudes towards the university, which they measured as a direct result of that. Sussex. Anybody from Sussex? So you'll know about this campaign. So I was involved in Impossible Until It's Done. So there the idea was to find something that brings the university together and as a common cause. And this is about how researchers don't just come up with a solution through a linear pathway and solve things quick and easily. They face challenges themselves. So it showcases the journey that they've been done, but it's also aspiration that the impossible can be done. And the phrase is drawn from Nelson Mandela, who was a visitor to Sussex many years ago. So lots of examples of that. And then the other side of it, and I think the next couple of examples are really important, is taking your mission, your particular focus as a university, your brand, and representing, pushing research that really aligns with that. So, best example, West Virginia University, based in a small town called Morgantown in West Virginia, which I've been to. They're called the Mountaineers. That's their thing, lots of mountains, the Appalachians around where they are. They have this aspirational message on the side of their main building, which is Mountaineers Go First. That's their brand push, that we're encouraging big, brave, bold people to move forward, to step up and take a lead. And this is me with their mascot. They vote for an annual mascot, which they call the Mountaineer, and that's me with their current mascot, the conference last month. And so what they do is they focus on certain research experts that align with that mountaineering approach, so outdoor recreation or Appalachian studies or physical activity or forest pathology or mountain, how mountains are eroding, the coal industry, which was big in West Virginia, has eroded the state of mountains, and how snowfall changes. So they focus really hard on the message that ties into this Mountaineers Go First theme. Same applies to the University of Florida around AI. So they've positioned themselves around the issue that they are the university for AI. So that means several things to them, but most importantly, they've got a huge fund of money that is about researching into AI issues. So they have a dedicated bureau of speakers, experts, policy advisors just working on AI. That's what they want to be known first and foremost for, and that's what they are championing. So again, emphasizing a certain point. Doesn't mean that they're doing a whole range of other things, of areas of expertise, but they're focusing that as a Trojan horse for interest, particularly for student markets. And this is quite an interesting example. So anybody heard of the London Interdisciplinary School? Yeah? How have you heard of them? Roughly. How did you come across it? Okay. So they're one to watch. So a new style institution set up recently, very innovative. Their focus is in creating degrees that bring in all sorts of subject areas. They don't sit in silos. They say problems of today are going to be solved by people who think outside those boxes and have to work on different elements. So what they do is they have a research project for every student, and students decide what their project, and that is the basis of their student experience. So they learn to tackle a problem as the core part of their program. And this example is a student who has done a piece of work looking at how AI, image-driven AI tools like ChatGPT is increasing stereotypes and racism and so on. So there's a great video on their website, which is this one, which has the AI Barbies, which you probably know about. They're talking about their research. So they have a series of different versions of AI Barbies talking about how that's... But they use this as an example of promoting to potential students that this is the sort of project that you will do as part of your studies here, and how it will make you get a completely different type of student experience. So most universities tend to say you're going to be taught by academics who also do research. So Bath, University of Bath, was a Will from University of Bath there. mentioned this earlier, Tim. This is just a typical example, really. You're going to be, if you come to this university, you're going to be taught by experts who research their things. And then we had, in 2013, the Birmingham Heroes campaign, which was the first example of its time to focus on academics as stars, stellar stars. And that continued for 4 or 5 years. And others started to copy that. So I think Loughborough had change makers, Oxford Brookes had future thinkers as their theme. So there's been lots of attempts to show the academic as the person that you're going to experience as part of your university degree. Good examples around research. So this is a piece from Forbes about the importance of students undertaking research as part of their undergraduate experience. And its basic premise is that too many people are turning to online and to chat GPT for their solutions. And there was this research project at Padua University that showed that 52% of chat GPT searches end up in producing the wrong evidence, the wrong information, the wrong data. So they're basically wrong, and they're telling you stuff that's wrong, and therefore how we need our students to develop their own discipline, research, studies and capability as well. So places like the University of New Hampshire are saying that's a superpower. If you come to our university, you will learn that skill, and you'll focus on learning to be a researcher as a student on an undergraduate program, and that's going to be your superpower. Do you know about this Derby campaign? So they've used, who watches Gogglebox? You don't like to admit it, do you? Nobody likes to. It's basically, Gogglebox is basically people watching TV and us watching them watching TV. Dull. But my kids like it. So one of the people who watches TV as part of this programme is Basit Siddiqui. He's a Derby graduate, as is his father, who also feature in Gogglebox. So the University of Derby ran a challenge, which he led as a figurehead, to go out to schools in the area to say, we want you to do a podcast demonstrating how you, in your sixth forms, are coming up with world-threatening issues and what you're going to do about it, basically. And they ran as a competition as part of their student engagement and student outreach, and they've had loads of responses into that. There are universities, so the University of Ohio, State University of Ohio, sent me this, which is their College of Arts magazine that they produce regularly. And what they say is when there are open days, lots of parents tend to get there early, and they sit like you are sitting, just waiting. They don't know each other, sitting there while there's parents with their children, brothers, sisters, or whatever, looking bored. So they give this out at the beginning. They won't physically wander around, and it has lots of research stories. And so you see them reading this and starting to understand the power of the university by doing that. And so that builds interest in that window you have where basically people are twiddling their thumbs. University of Arizona also does something similar, but they have a very simple one-page summary of what their research expertise is and their research strength and credibility as well. So back to Reading. So I talked about Climate Stripe. So they have, in the last couple of years, tied this heavily into student recruitment. So you may know that there's now a new version of PlayStation out. And as part of that, the university has worked on an interactive climate section, climate station game. So you can go on there. Have you played this, chaps? So you can run different forecasts and test your ability to solve climate change, basically, as part of the gaming. And they were working with Sony to produce this, and they've just been using it in their open day. So if you come to the open day at the university as a prospective student, you could experiment by using this game. So they're using gaming as a device to tie that message in as well. And quite cleverly, there's now a Show Your Stripes Day, which is 21st of June every year. And they had their open day on that day as well. And it was the culmination of the Reading Climate Festival leading up to that as well. And then finally, so targeting the influences of prospective students So one particular example is the teaching profession. So making sure that we're getting content, research content, seeded in the minds of teachers who are advising their students about their choices, about which university and subject matter to consider. So Carleton University is one example in Canada, who've done a lot of work to promote their work of their Centre for Initiatives in Education, to target research content into their teachers across Canada, and therefore teachers now know that Carleton University exists and does all sorts of things, and it's a university that should be considered as well. So if you have an education faculty in your armoury, you've got that right as well. Finally, from me, so Gen Z I've talked about. Gen Alpha is where we are now. So this is the 15 to 0-year-olds at the moment. Then we're moving into Beta and Gamma. There is an organisation called McCrindle in Australia that produces lots of demographic trends, stats. I would suggest you look at their website because it tells you the channels that are anticipated for use in the future and how that's changing, the sort of habits and behaviours that are coming online. And they're constantly looking at the way things are happening. So again, it's thinking for the long term. So this is the generation that coming up for 2030 is going to be quite important in terms of studying at universities as well. And one of the things, I've done quite a lot of focus groups with students, and one of the things that they tell me is what they would like universities to do more of is to play to their expectations that they're used to with gaming and with watching interactive TV programs. So this is the Traitors. Do you have Traitors in Germany? No. A version of, virtually every country has stolen our idea, which is basically to watch people behaving suspiciously to out those that are designated traitors within the cast. And that's the sort of thing that students want. They want that sort of interactive, I'm learning alongside others. You know, it's interesting, it's fun, it's dynamic, it's a bit different, and I want that sort of experience. So some universities in America, and they've stolen it, and have a US version of the Traitors, and some universities are now using it as an idea for open days, so that instead of just having show and tell stuff, they have an interactive experience along these lines that people can benefit really from. So lots of examples of how this is happening at the moment. It's quite innovative stuff going on. Conscious I've raced through quite a lot. Be interested to know if there are other examples that you have to point out, and also any questions that you may have as well. So.
I think so.
Could you say where you're from? So.
I'm Robin. I'm from the University of Portsmouth on the south coast, and we have a lot of really interesting research happening, but there are so many different areas. I feel like the university it's not as enthusiastic about sticking with a KPI or something that really stands out and running with it. And we also do have a lot of trouble with being, I suppose, being fought on having research at the forefront, because it's usually recruitment focused stuff. They don't really see the value of research in recruitment. They want to see numbers and obviously metrics and stuff, which is not always the easiest thing to relay when it's news or research based. Is there any advice that you give when trying to convince people in power?
Yeah, I mean, those examples are useful, aren't they? That we've got a generation of young people who are interested in world problems, and that's what some of those examples have shown. I mean, that diagram, the wheel that I showed about making that link between research as a basis for knowledge, then trust, which is essential. So I might know you exist as a university, but do I trust you enough to put you on my list of those to be considered? And then the choices that I'm going to make. And I think research has a role to play in each of those elements. On the issue of focus, prioritising, so I've been bruised many times by that. I've worked with universities who've given me a challenge to say, well, we need to identify one or two key areas of research that we're going to champion as a university. And so I work with them to identify those, and then the Vice-Chancellor comes in and says, no, we're not going to do that because we're not going to offend our academics, and we need to please all the people all the time, basically. So my answer to that is, if you work in communications, you can call this campaigns. Don't call it a research strategy or research priorities, call it campaigns. And people get that because it implies it's short term and it's for a dedicated purpose. So you can have a series of campaigns that you're working on over time. So that's another get around that I've learned around that approach, dealing campaigns to help you prioritise, but not call it a strategic focus. Incidentally, I think Portsmouth, didn't you spend a lot of money with the Times hire in the past?
Yeah, that's a separate team from ours, which certainly, but yeah, the brand team would spend quite a lot of paid for pieces rather than organic media, but our team works with organic media also, so we're all for research, promoting research. It's just always, one case really.
Hi, I'm Serena Pitchell from the University of Sussex Business School. Just a comment, I've got a comment and a question just on the Traitors game. We have one of our faculty members bet heavily on a game called Genius Game, talking about he was on there with negotiation skills, and we had a whole social media campaign in the run-up to that with talking head video clips on aspects of negotiation to lead in, to kind of promote his appearance on that game. And it was really successful. So again, that's another creative way of getting somebody on.
Grab you after about that.
Yeah, so, and that was very recently. I'm interested in podcasts. We have been working with, we've got faculty who create their own podcasts, and we've got research centres that do podcasts, so we actively promote those. But I'm keen for the business school to trial its own podcast. I think I've conceived the real potential. I think, for me, looking at research as a hook for potential students, so it's picking up some of the things that you were talking about. Do you have any examples of some really great university podcasts that are utilising research in that way to speak, other than the one that
Chicago is the best example of that I mentioned. Really worth looking at or listening to, I should say. There are quite a few. I've listened to a lot, and there's a lot of bad stuff, which is basically it goes back to the old days of when we first had we were promoting universities. Aren't they wonderful? Here's everybody having a voice on different subject matter, whatever that is, and the minutiae of how a university works. And a lot of steered into that, and it just devalues what it's about. So I have two older brothers, they both had heart attacks at 62. I've got a long way to go till then, but so when I learned they had heart attacks, I prepared myself. I started to do a lot of working. I now have an hour and a half's lunch break, and I walk fast-paced every lunch hour, recommend it. And in that time, I listen to podcasts. And that's great value because I learn so much. But I would recommend just experimenting and listening to some of those.
Because they've got a great specialism in communications, and their professor, I think, I forget his name, but they've got a really good podcast series. So I think there is material out there. But
What's in Trent one is really good. I mean, talk to Helena.
And before the hand of the mic back, what is the university that does all those amazing graphics on the generation of
So that's McCrindle. It's an Australian demographics company. Yeah.
Rob O'Hanlon from Dublin City University. Just on the podcast thing, we're we consider ourselves quite allergic to podcasts generally. In terms of their bang for their buck, particularly we're a small team, so we kind of have to maximise our time and our resources. And we found that quite often podcasts that were put out by academics, unless they were professionally produced, which is obviously quite costly, tended to be rambling, very long, and not interesting at all. But one example of ours that actually we found worked really, really well was from a staff member who's unfortunately left to go to another position. He was embedded within our Faculty of Science and Health, and he ran what he called 120 seconds of science. which was academics talking about a key research paper, a key element of their research, or whatever it happened to be, but they only had 2 minutes to do it in. Now, it was a fair bit of work on his part because he had to tend to basically interview them and often write the script for them. They would proof it, they would change it, he would rewrite it because it would have expanded from 2 minutes to 30 minutes again. But it was a good exercise for them as well because it effectively doubled his media training as well, that when they were interviewed about it, be it on radio, television, whatever it happened to be, that they were able to distill their research down into those understandable 2 minutes. But yeah, it was a huge challenge, but a very effective one. It's worth listening, and as far as I know, it's still available on the website as well. So we're DCU, Dublin City University.
Yeah, I think it's all in the planning. I've done the training. It's if you do at it like it's a radio show and treat it as that medium, I think. But it requires a hand.
Yeah. It's the steady hand, I suppose, is the most.
Does
important
anybody
part.
listen to the Rest Is History podcast? Brilliant, love it. Got two bright, clever people, and they play off each other in a humorous way, and they're really intelligent and quick. They know their stuff instantly, and it just pours with excitement and energy and knowledge. And if you're interested in history, I would recommend that series. I think there are about 500 episodes now available. So
I was just going to say that I think it's Gemini, the Google AI, that does. I hesitate to call it really good, but it's quite incredible to witness. You can give it a load of information and it will turn it into a podcast. And it has nailed that excruciating American approach of bants between two people. Hey, let's look at the data. It's really interesting, Michael. It's really, really uncanny to witness.
You can call into them now as well. You can call into an AI podcast
Oh, God.
and then listen to your questions.
Oh, my God.
It's really scary.
None of you must use that. It sounds terrible. Any other questions? Okay, we'll just come here first and then here second.
Hi there, it's Steve Bates from Bournemouth University. Loads of really good examples of things that look good and obviously say have gone down well, but I guess to be properly impactful, they have to actually impact on student numbers. So I guess, how do you take the other good examples, and I'll take examples from the room as well, of a campaign or a podcast that's had measurable impact on recruitment, so we can see the numbers changing, and how do they go about measuring that impact?
So I don't have any evidence of that because the cause and effect is quite hard. The chain is quite long to promote. Started to see universities ask those questions from open days now, experiences, but it goes back to what I was saying about this wheel. It's part of the interest drivers of prospective students and how you play into that agenda, and also using it as a way of attracting and engaging thing. I think if you look at the Derby example, not necessarily about research directly, but more about creating an opportunity with a school or a series of schools to get involved in something. I think that's probably more measurable, but I don't have data from Derby to prove that. Unless anybody else has got any examples where they have tied research into the student returns.
So our research reimagined campaign, we find it's mostly post-grad student recruitment. We can see from the web stats that there's spikes when we release things in terms of who's visiting the website and then heading off kind of post-grad pages and stuff. So we do find it works well. I don't know about undergrad.
I mean, I'm Lizzie from King's College London. I was going to ask a similar question about kind of the data on what seems to perform best in terms of tangible outcomes, so you get return on investment.
The place to ask this question is IRMA, because they're doing all sorts of things to looking at measurement. And part of my project that I mentioned at the beginning is to look at how we are measuring what we do as a result, the methods and channels that we use and what happens as a result of that. Unfortunately, most of the data is around the channel use. So, how many people visit us, follow us, like us, read this, read that, whatever, rather than what happens as a result. That's something we need to work on.
Thank
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria from the University of Leeds. So we have a podcast called How to Fix. It's sort of all about interdisciplinary people from different disciplines on how to fix a certain problem. And I'm interested in, if you listen to a lot of sort of research university podcasts, as to what makes a good one. If there are a lot of bad ones out there, what differentiates them really?
Well, I think they have to speak to you. I mean, not everybody's the same. You have to have an interest in the subject matter, don't you? And I don't think you can have any examples where an individual is listening to every podcast of an individual university, because your choices are there to look at different subject matter. I would say what makes a good one is the rest is history model, which is, it's pacey, it's interesting. The academics really know their stuff. They're really sharing stuff that you may not know about. They're talking about other sources as well. But it's humorous. It's really engaging in the way they do it. Having more than one person is good, so it's not just a standard interview type approach. I think, has anybody from Aston here? So I don't know, I was speaking to Sue before she left, and she was saying that there was an idea to do more around the beneficiaries of research rather than the researchers themselves. So the focus being on a business that benefits from the research at Aston and interviewing them through a podcast series or whatever. So I don't know whether that ever happened.
That did happen. It was really good in showing the work that we do with small businesses, and it was quite good at getting the business community engaged in working with the university, which was quite a good option for us. That's kind of stopped now with the change, and we're looking at what type of podcasts we do. So there's a new one which is around true crime, because we do forensic linguistics, and that's picked up really well, hasn't it? Yeah. I haven't been involved in that, but it's done really well, and that's all around research. So yeah.
Yeah, the podcast is called Writing Wrongs, if anybody wants to look it up. It's my favourite podcast at the moment, and not just because I'm asked.
What's it called?
Writing Wrongs. But writing like writing. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question.
Run out.
Thanks very much, Justin.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Before we all break up, can I just hand over to Stephen Kahn briefly for a quick word? Stephen Kahn, editor of The Conversation. Steve.
Sorry, thanks, Michael. My name's Stephen Kahn. I'm the co-founder of The Conversation and editor-in-chief of the network. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many of you here today, and well done to Michael for arranging such a riveting agenda. I really enjoyed that presentation as well, so thanks very much for that. I just wanted to very briefly say, by the way, on the subject of podcasts, you please do check out the Conversation podcast. It's obviously not going to offer everyone a weekly opportunity, but there is a weekly publication. They are speaking to a couple of academics from across the network every week, and we've just picked up a couple of really big awards. It was the Podcast Publishers Podcast of the Year, and a special edition series that we ran and picked up a particularly esteemed award as well. So that was like beating out like the FT and the BBC and Reuters and places. So definitely worth checking out. And as I say, real opportunities there for researchers to reach a significant audience. The main thing I was just going to mention, though, was that one of my colleagues, Matt Warren, is going to be coming along in about half an hour or so. And he's going to be carrying a big bundle of leaflets. So please check out these leaflets. They all relate to an event that takes place in Dubai later this year called Prototypes for Humanity. We're actually the media partner of that project. Prototypes for Humanity, which I attended last year, gives primarily PhD candidates, but early career academics, an opportunity to present their research. So it will fly people out there. There's a week of presentations, a week of workshops, and there are funding opportunities, critically funding opportunities for early career researchers. So they are looking for applications for that. As I say, Matt's going to come along with information which you can share with your academics, which will show them how to apply and how to get involved in that project. But as I say, yeah, I attended last year. I think it's a great opportunity to deliver impact, and I would strongly encourage people to submit applications to prototypes. But yeah, enjoy the rest of the day, and again, thanks very much for coming along.